The morning began like any other, with the city slowly waking under a pale sky. Streetlights flickered off one by one as shopkeepers lifted shutters, and the smell of fresh bread drifted through narrow lanes. People moved with purpose, eyes fixed on their destinations, unaware that a small act of kindness was about to quietly change several lives. Arav adjusted the strap of his worn backpack as he stepped off the bus. At 26, he carried more responsibility than most his age. Since his father's passing, Arav had become the backbone of his small household, juggling a modest office job and caring for his ailing mother. Life had taught him discipline, but it had also hardened him. He believed kindness was a luxury, something people could afford only when they had extra time or money. Today, like most days, he was focused on getting to work on time. As he crossed the busy road, he noticed an elderly man sitting near the pavement, struggling with a bundle of old clothes. The man's hands trembled as he tried to fold them neatly, but the wind kept undoing his efforts. People passed by without a glance. Arav slowed for a moment, his instinct telling him to help, but his phone buzzed with a reminder about an important meeting. He hesitated, then continued walking, convincing himself that someone else would stop. A few steps later, guilt tugged at him. He remembered his mother's words from years ago. Beta, kindness never makes you late. It takes you where you're meant to be. Arav stopped, sighed, and turned back. Uncle, may I help you? He asked gently. The old man looked up, surprise and relief mixing in his tired eyes. If you don't mind, son. My fingers don't listen to me anymore. Arav crouched down, helping him fold the clothes and tie them securely. It took less than 2 minutes, but in that brief time, something shifted. The old man smiled, a smile that carried gratitude deeper than words. Thank you, he said. Most people don't see me. Arav nodded, unsure what to say. He stood up and offered a small amount of money, not much, just enough for a meal. The old man tried to refuse, but Arav insisted. As he walked away, he felt lighter, though he couldn't explain why. Across the city, Mira was having a very different morning. She was new to the town, a school teacher who had moved to start, fresh after a difficult divorce. The unfamiliar streets made her anxious, and today she was already running late for her first day at a new school. At the bus stop, she realized her wallet was missing. Panic set in as she searched her bag again and again. I must have dropped it, she whispered, her heart sinking. The bus arrived, doors opening with a hiss. She stood frozen, knowing she couldn't board without money. Tears welled in her eyes as the driver impatiently waited. Just then, a woman stepped forward from the line behind her. Are you okay? The woman asked softly. Mira explained, embarrassed and frustrated. Without hesitation, the woman handed her some cash. Take this. Pay me back someday by helping someone else. Mira tried to protest, but the woman smiled and shook her head. The bus driver nodded, and Mira stepped aboard, overwhelmed by gratitude. She didn't even get the woman's name. At the same time, in a quiet hospital room, Rohan sat beside his younger sister Anaya. She was only 10, but illness had stolen much of her childhood. Rohan had taken the day off work to sit with her, reading her favorite stories and trying to keep her spirits high. When a nurse entered to inform him that an important medicine was out of stock and expensive to arrange, his face fell. He had barely enough savings to manage daily expenses. Outside the room, Rohan leaned against the wall, fighting tears. A stranger passing by noticed his distress. It was Arav, who had arrived at the hospital late for his meeting and decided to visit his friend who worked there. Seeing Rohan's pain, Arav asked what was wrong. Normally, Rohan would have brushed him off, but something in Arav's calm presence made him open up. Without thinking too much, Arav offered to help cover part of the medicine cost. I can't do everything, he said honestly, but I can do this much. Rohan stared at him, stunned. Why would you help a stranger? Arav smiled faintly. I was helped today too, in a way. Maybe this is how it goes forward. The medicine was arranged, and Anaya's condition stabilized. When Arav left the hospital, he realized he had missed his meeting entirely. Yet, instead of anxiety, he felt a deep sense of peace. Days passed, and the ripples of those small acts continued to spread. Mira, inspired by the kindness she had received, began paying extra attention to her students, especially those who seemed lonely or troubled. One afternoon, she noticed a quiet boy who never brought lunch. She started packing an extra sandwich each day, pretending it was a mistake. The boy's shy smile became the highlight of her afternoons. Rohan, determined to honor Arav's help, began volunteering at the hospital whenever he could. He helped other families navigate paperwork, offered tea to exhausted parents, and shared hope with those who needed it most. As for Arav, he found himself changed. He started noticing people more, listening more. He helped his neighbor carry groceries, smiled at the security guard, and even convinced his office to start a small fund for emergency assistance. His mother noticed the difference too. You look happier, she said one evening. I think I finally understand what you meant, Arav replied. Kindness doesn't take time, it gives it meaning. One evening, all their paths nearly crossed again at a small community event organized by volunteers from the hospital and local schools. None of them realized how deeply their lives were already connected, bound by unseen threads of compassion. As the sun set, laughter and quiet conversations filled the air. There was no grand speech, no dramatic moment, just people being present for one another. And in that simplicity lay something powerful. This is what Small Acts Big Hearts believes in, that even the smallest gesture, done without expectation, can create waves far beyond what we imagine. Because sometimes, all it takes to change the world is one small act of kindness. The following week arrived quietly, carrying with it the kind of changes that don't announce themselves, but settle gently into everyday life. The city looked the same on the surface, yet something invisible had begun to shift, as if kindness itself was moving from one heart to another, unnoticed but unstoppable. Arav now walked to work with a slower pace. Not because he had more time, but because he had learned to look around. He noticed the chai vendor who always served customers with a tired smile, the stray dog that slept near the metro stairs, and the office cleaner who arrived before everyone else and left after dark. These were people and lives he had once passed. Without thought, one morning, as Arav waited for his bus, he saw the same elderly man from before. This time, the man wasn't struggling. He was sitting upright, neatly dressed, sipping tea. When their eyes met, recognition sparked instantly. Son! The old man called out, waving. Arav walked over, surprised and pleased. Uncle, you look well today, the old man chuckled. Because someone reminded me I still matter. That day, after you helped me, another man offered me work at his shop. Just folding clothes and keeping watch. Small job, but honest. Arav felt a warmth spread through him. He hadn't expected his simple help to lead to something bigger. As the bus arrived, the old man placed a hand on Arav's shoulder. Never stop being who you were that day. Across town, Mira's classroom buzzed with life. She was slowly becoming more confident in her new surroundings, and her students had begun to trust her. One particular student, Ayan, had changed noticeably since she started giving him lunch. He now raised his hand in class and stayed back to help arrange books. One afternoon, Mira received a call from the school office. Ayan's mother had come to see her. Mira worried she might have crossed a boundary. But when she entered the office, she saw a woman with anxious eyes and folded hands. My son tells me you take care of him, the woman said softly. I work 2 jobs. Some days I can't pack lunch. He said you never made him feel small. Mira swallowed hard, emotion tightening her throat. He's a good child. He just needed a little care." The woman nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You don't know what this means to us." That evening, Mira sat alone in her small apartment, thinking about the stranger at the bus stop who had helped her weeks ago. She still hadn't found her, but she realized something important. Kindness didn't need to be returned to the same person. It just needed to keep moving. At the hospital, Rohan had become a familiar face. Nurses smiled when they saw him, and other families often approached him for guidance. One night, while helping an elderly couple fill out forms, Rohan noticed a young man sitting alone, staring at the floor. He recognized that look, the same helplessness he had once felt. Rohan sat beside him. "First time here?" The man nodded. "My father's inside. I don't know how we'll manage." Rohan listened, offered reassurance, and shared what little he knew about assistance programs. As he spoke, he realized he had become the stranger he once needed. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Arav's words echoed. This is how it goes forward. Fate has a quiet way of bringing people together again. One rainy evening, the city experienced a sudden power outage. Traffic slowed, shops closed early, and the hospital ran on backup generators. Arav, Mira, and Rohan all found themselves stuck near the same crowded shelter beside the hospital gate, waiting for the rain to ease. Mira stood holding her bag tightly, trying to avoid puddles. Arav offered her space under his umbrella without a word. She smiled politely, unaware of their invisible connection. Rohan arrived moments later, helping an older woman walk safely. As thunder rolled overhead, a child slipped and fell near the shelter. Before anyone else reacted, Mira rushed forward, lifting the child gently. Arav helped steady him while Rohan searched for the child's parents. Within moments, the boy was safe, crying but unharmed. The parents arrived, frantic and grateful, thanking all three of them repeatedly. They exchanged brief smiles, a shared sense of relief passing between them. None of them knew they were part of the same story, but something about that moment felt familiar, comforting. The rain eventually slowed. Power returned. People began to leave. As they parted ways, Arav felt a strange sense of completeness. Mira felt lighter, as if she truly belonged in this city now. Rohan felt hopeful, believing that no matter how hard life became, goodness would always find a way through. That night, Arav wrote in his journal for the first time in years. He wrote about how one small decision had changed the rhythm of his life. Mira called her mother and spoke with confidence she hadn't felt in a long time. Rohan sat beside Anaya, who was sleeping peacefully, and whispered promises of a brighter future. Kindness had not solved all their problems. Bills still existed. Pain still returned. Life remained unpredictable, but something essential had shifted within them. They no longer felt alone, and that is the quiet truth. Small acts, big hearts lives by. Kindness doesn't erase darkness, but it gives us light enough to walk through it together. Sometimes, the world doesn't change with loud gestures or grand sacrifices. Sometimes it changes when ordinary people choose to care, one moment at a time, and this was only the beginning. Time moved forward, as it always does, but the echoes of kindness refused to fade. What had begun as a few ordinary moments had now woven itself into the everyday lives of people who would never call themselves heroes. They were simply learning how to care, and in doing so, they were slowly healing parts of themselves they didn't even know were broken. Arav's office announced a new project that required long hours and tight deadlines. Stress returned, creeping into his routine. Yet this time, he didn't carry it alone. During lunch breaks, he spoke to colleagues instead of scrolling endlessly on his phone. When one coworker, Neha, confessed she was struggling to balance work and caring for her newborn, Arav suggested flexible shift swaps. What started as a small idea soon became an informal support system within the office. Productivity didn't drop. If anything, people worked with more heart. One evening, as Arav Waited for the elevator, Neha stopped him. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "But you did. And it made all the difference." Arav smiled. "I'm just passing along what I learned." Across the city, Mira's classroom had become a place of quiet warmth. She had started a simple routine. Every Friday, students could share something good that happened during the week, no matter how small. At first, they were hesitant, but slowly stories emerged. A shared pencil, a friend who waited, a parent who smiled after. A long day. One Friday, Ayan raised his hand. "My good thing," he said shyly, "is that my mother sleeps better now. She worries less because of school." The class fell silent. Mira felt her eyes sting, but she kept her voice steady. She realized then that teaching was not just about lessons and exams. It was about shaping safe spaces where children felt seen. That same week, Mira noticed a new student, Ria, who sat alone and avoided eye contact. Remembering her own first days in the city, Mira paired Ria with Ayan for group work. It was a simple choice, but it sparked a friendship that eased Ria's fear and gave Ayn confidence he never knew he had. At the hospital, Rohan faced one of his hardest days. Anaya's condition fluctuated and fear returned like a storm. But this time, Rohan wasn't isolated. The nurses checked in on him. Another parent brought him tea. A volunteer offered to sit with Anaya so Rohan could rest. Late at night, as Rohan stood by the window, he realized something powerful. Kindness had created a circle around him. He wasn't surviving alone anymore. A few days later, Anaya insisted on visiting the hospital garden. Wrapped in a light shawl, she looked up at the sky and smiled. "But Cha," she whispered, "when I get better I want to help children here." "Like you do." Rohan knelt beside her, his voice trembling. "You already are helping me." Life, however, doesn't move in straight lines. One afternoon, a sudden accident near the school caused chaos. A cyclist was injured, and people gathered, unsure what to do. Mira, walking back after school hours, didn't panic. She remembered the calm she had seen in others before. She asked someone to call an ambulance, used her dapata to stop the bleeding, and spoke gently to the injured man until help arrived. Later, shaken but safe at home, she realized courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to act despite it. News of the incident spread locally, but Mira avoided attention. When a colleague praised her bravery, she replied softly, "Anyone would have done the same." Yet deep down, she knew she had changed. That evening, fate once again nudged their lives closer. A small fundraising event was organized at the community center near the hospital to support patients who couldn't afford treatment. Arav's office contributed. Mira's school sent handmade cards. Rohan volunteered to help manage the crowd. As Arav entered the hall, he noticed a display of children's drawings from Mira's school. He paused, studying one in particular. Simple picture of people holding hands under a bright sun. The caption read, "Small acts make big hearts." Mira stood nearby, arranging cards. Rohan approached with donation boxes. For a brief moment, all three stood close, connected by the same invisible thread that had guided them for weeks. They exchanged polite smiles, a sense of familiarity passing between them without explanation. None of them spoke much, yet there was comfort in the silence. As the event ended, the collected funds exceeded expectations. Not because of one big donation, but because of many small ones. Coins, notes, quiet generosity. Rohan looked around the hall and thought of Anaya's smile. Mira thought of her students. Arav thought of the old man at the bus stop. Each of them understood something now. Kindness multiplies when shared. That night, the city rested under a calm sky. Somewhere a child slept with hope. A mother felt relief. A stranger felt seen, and within ordinary lives, something extraordinary continued to grow. Because at small acts, Big hearts, this is the belief we carry forward. No act of kindness is ever wasted. It finds its way, shapes lives, and returns in forms we never expect. Story was still unfolding. And as long as people chose compassion, it always would be. The days slowly settled into a gentle rhythm, as if life itself was taking a deep breath. Nothing extraordinary happened on the surface, yet everything felt different underneath. The city continued to rush. Lights flickered on and off, buses came and went, but within a few hearts, something permanent had taken root. Arav stood by the window of his office late one evening, watching the city glow below. The project had finally ended. Deadlines were met, stress had eased, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel empty after success. He packed his bag and decided to walk home instead of taking the bus. On the way, he passed the small tea stall near the corner. The same chai vendor smiled at him, this time with genuine warmth. "Chai?" the man asked. Arav nodded and sat down. As he sipped, he realized how unfamiliar this version of himself would have felt just a few months ago. Someone who stopped, noticed, listened. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to his mother. "I'll be home early. Let's eat together." At home, his mother looked at him with quiet pride. "You seem lighter these days," she said again. Arav smiled. "Maybe I stopped carrying only myself." Across the city, Mira sat at her desk, grading notebooks. The school year was nearing its end, and change was in the air. She had been offered a transfer to another city, better pay, better facilities. A few months ago, she wouldn't have thought twice. But now, her heart hesitated. The next day, she stood in front of her class and announced the news. The room fell silent. Ayan looked down at his desk. Ria bit her lip. I took a breath. "I haven't decided yet." After class, Ayan approached her. "Ma'am," he said softly, "wherever you go, will you still help children?" Mira knelt to his level. "Always." That night, she declined the transfer. She realized this city had given her more than a fresh start. It had given her purpose. At the hospital, Rohan received news he had prayed for endlessly. Anaya was responding well to treatment. The doctors spoke carefully, but hope was no longer fragile, it was real. When Rohan told Anaya, her face lit up. "Does that mean I can go home soon?" "Soon," he said, his voice breaking. Before leaving the hospital that day, Rohan stopped at the notice board. A new volunteer list was being prepared. He added his name again, then paused and added Anaya's too, smiling to himself. Weeks later, a small gathering took place in the hospital garden. Nothing grand, just patients, families, volunteers, teachers, office workers. A simple thank you event for everyone who had contributed, in ways big and small. Arav arrived with his mother. Mira came with a group of students holding handmade cards. Rohan walked in holding Anaya's hand. This time, their paths finally crossed for more than a moment. Anaya noticed Mira's students first. "Baya, look," she whispered, tugging Rohan's hand. Rohan smiled and approached. Mira turned, recognition flickering faintly in her eyes. Arav stood nearby, listening, feeling that familiar pull of connection. Introductions happened naturally. Names were exchanged. Stories overlapped. "You were the one who helped with the medicine?" Rohan asked Arav quietly, realization dawning. Arav nodded, surprised. "And you're the brother?" Mira listened, stunned, as pieces fell into place. The hospital, the shelter, the fundraiser. Her eyes softened. "So we were never strangers," she said. They laughed gently, the kind of laughter that comes from understanding. As the evening settled, Anaya released a handful of paper birds into the air. Each one carried a message written by patients and children. Hope, thank you. Someone helped me. I will help someone too. The paper birds floated briefly before falling, scattered across the garden. No one rushed to pick them up. They didn't need to. Their meaning had already landed where it mattered. As people began to leave, Arav looked around and felt something he had searched for all his life, not success, not comfort, but belonging. Meera watched her students talk excitedly with Anaya. Her heart full, Rohan squeezed his sister's hand, knowing that even if life challenged them again, they would never face it alone. That night, the city slept peacefully. Somewhere, a teacher prepared lessons with extra care. Somewhere, a brother planned a future with hope. Somewhere, a young man chose kindness without hesitation. No headlines were written. No awards were given. Yet lives had changed, because this is the truth. Small acts. Big Heart stands for kindness doesn't need applause. It only needs to be passed on. And with that, this chapter closes. But the story never really ends.